Welcome to Issues That Matter. I'm Cynthia Pooler. My guest today is Robert Meeropol. And Robert and I have had many discussions in the past, and we're going to have one about the political climate, not only in the United States, but in the world. So, Robert, what do you think about first of all, what do you think about the outcome of the election?
Well, I think that what they taught me was that that there was sort of I don't know how to describe it, but there was the use of political polling to try to get a certain response. In other words, there was all these predictions of a massive, quote, red wave that seemed to me like the supporters of the red wave were trying to push them in with the idea behind them that it would discourage Democrats from voting, and therefore it would help this red wave. But it turned out that I don't think all that hype about the polls made any difference whatsoever. I'm not sure that because really there was what I would call, rather than a red wave, it was kind of like a pink ripple. And even that pink ripple, and I don't want to dish your home state, me being from Massachusetts and you from New York, but I'm not sure the Democrats would have lost the House if it weren't for the shenanigans of corporate Democrats in New York. Because one of the things that you have to realize about, and this is not really, I'm going on a tangent, but I'm thinking about the railroad strike right now.
Right.
One of the things you realize about these corporate Democrats is they'd rather have corporate Republicans win than have the socialist wing of the Democratic Party win. And I think this, you look at the votes around the railroad strike, which is you'd think we're back in the 19th century. We're arguing over paid sick time. People who get sick and can't work because they're sick are going to lose pay, or they're going to have to work sick, which is insane in this time of COVID and all the other.
Right.
But what you have is a coalition. I mean, it's like the corporate wing of the Democratic Party is just delighted to get together with their Republican buddies and pass this. And so that is the state of politics that I see, is that, and this is looking at it in a macro sense, that corporate Democrats are more concerned about, the left, the people to their left, than they are about, they're just dying to get back to these mainstream Republicans. It's almost like they're crying for the good old days when they together could, make sure that capitalism remained in total, and corporate America remained in total control. And that's, what's sad about that is that there's one more element that's been added to this, which has made it more complicated. And that is, I see within the capitalist, within corporate America, a division between the corporations and their supporters, who are embracing for the first time diverse capitalism, versus white nationalist capitalism. In other words, there's I've invented a new political word for the Republican Party, they're diversiphobes. That the Democratic Party, what's different about this Democratic Party today is that they've embraced diversity. And when you think about it, capitalism can deal with diversity. They want the diverse American public to consume their products.
Right.
If you oppress Black people too much, if you oppress people of color too much, they won't have any money to buy their products. So if you can create a capitalism that appeals to all people with money, and you don't exclude people of color who are becoming an increasing portion of the population from that bonanza or that ability to have money and to buy things, then you have what they would consider a healthy economy. The Republicans hate that because their old settler colonialist ideology of white superiority is very much threatened by that. When they talk about replacement theory, they are being replaced. They're being replaced as the dominant majority, and they're turning into a not so dominant plurality. So the result is the Democratic Party has really made a change. The idea that the Republicans and Democrats are the same, I don't think flies anymore. But within the Democratic Party, there are those people who support diversity because they're interested in equality and fairness. And there are people who support diversity because it's going to help capitalists sell products. And that division plays out within the Democratic Party. And you have, and it's not clear to me where that's going. And so that's that situation. Then on the Republican side, what we have, I think, is a lose-lose situation. They can either stick with Trump and they'll lose because he's unpopular, or they're going to go with someone else as a Trump alternative and they'll lose because that guy's not Trump. They've put themselves in this terrible box in terms of going forward. And how are they going to get out of it? With insurrection, with coups, with whether there's a coup through the Supreme Court giving legislatures power to overturn the will of the voters, or whether they're going to do it through their infiltration of our secret police forces and the military, or whether it's going to be a combination of both. The ultra-right of the Republican Party, which has grown in power, is basically arguing, I think, within their group that we can't win elections, so let's make elections irrelevant. We want to maintain power without winning elections. And so when you look at what's going on within the Democratic Party and what's going on within the Republican Party, you have an extremely volatile political situation. And that's my analysis. I don't know what you think of that.
Let me ask you this question. You say there's a division within the Republican Party, right? There's also a big division within the Democratic Party. Would you agree?
Yes, so I agree.
Both parties right now are in pretty bad shape. And I think the fact that Biden is the front runner for 2024 only highlights that there's nobody in the bullpen coming up and that's ready to run. And he's 80 years old.
Yes.
Robert, he's older than we are.
Yeah, he's older than we are, and when I listen to him speak, he seems largely incoherent. I agree with you 100%. The Democrats' inability to come up with anybody other than Biden Now, I have conversations with friends about these things, and some people have pointed out, well, if you look historically, 2 years before the election of Bill Clinton, nobody had ever heard of Bill Clinton. 2 years before the election of Jimmy Carter, nobody had ever heard of Jimmy Carter. And 2 years before the election of Barack Obama, who'd heard of Barack Obama? So in some ways, perhaps someone will emerge, but frankly, Cynthia, I don't see it. I don't see it. And it's not a good situation. And for me, when I look for light, for encouragement, I see the growth of the faction of the Democratic Party that is sort of represented by Bernie Sanders and AOC. But it doesn't matter if they grow from 10% to 20%. They're still a minority, and they still can't do much because of that. So, I don't think domestic politics are in a good place, and I don't see them getting in a good place. So, it's hard to be optimistic. And I think really the next 2 years, it's not clear to me that we're going to see anything more than the confirmation of a lot of Democratic leaning judges. And beyond that, I doubt much is going to happen, except, you have raised a very serious question when you talk about the danger of nuclear war. That, the United States not only operates on the domestic scene, it operates on the global scene.
Right.
And I think we're in a perilous situation. I think we're that regional powers are going to fight over increasingly scarce resources. The environmental issues are going to drive these conflicts. And the current situation in Ukraine, which I think the West wants, or I would say the corporate West, wants the war to go on indefinitely.
Right.
And the war will go on indefinitely until there is some sort of negotiation, which it doesn't seem like the United States and the Western NATO powers particularly want there to be a negotiation.
My understanding is we want to cripple Russia.
Well, yes, that's right. We want to damage Russia as much as possible, and all of that is part of, we want to control the world as much as possible.
Right.
But I think, and if you had asked me this, if you had talked to me about this a month ago, even, I think I would have said, yeah, it would be nice theoretically to have some sort of negotiations, but there's nothing to negotiate. What's changed for me is, in reading other people's work, I see a potential negotiating position. I see, I see what the left in the United States, I believe, should be advocating. And that is that, I believe that the people are sovereign. Okay, so what the people in a certain area want in terms of who governs them, they should have the say of who governs them. And the reality is looking at Ukraine, I have no idea what the people in Crimea want. Okay. and I have no, and that's been controlled by the Russian Federation without contest for the last 9 years or 8.5 years.
Mm,
The same in the Donbas region, where there's been this civil war going on for the last, that's killed tens of thousands of people since 2014.
mm,
I don't know what those people want either. And just because there have been phony referendums that Russia has conducted saying that they all want to join Russia, that doesn't mean anything. It seems to me what needs to happen is that both the Crimea and the Donbas regions have to be turned into military-free zones under UN supervision, and free and fair elections need to take place, or referenda need to take place among the people there to determine whether they want to be part of Ukraine or whether they want to be part of the Russian Federation. And then the results should determine what happens. Now, I think, and I see you about to object because you're probably going to say, but neither side's going to agree to this. And
correct.
I think that's true, but that's the sign of a good compromise, that neither side likes it.
Mhm.
But I don't see any other way to end the war other than doing that.
Okay, let me ask you this question. When it came to funding for Ukraine,
Mhm.
the you and me and every other taxpayer in this country, gave Ukraine billions and billions of dollars. And it was more or less a bipartisan thing where the Republicans as well as the Democrats supported it. So if both parties support funding a war, what's the difference between the parties?
Well, in that case, and I want to point out, I want to make a correction, though I don't think you're going to disagree with me at all. We didn't give billions of dollars to Ukraine. We gave billions of dollars to the military industrial complex in the United
Correct.
States, and
Right.
then they manufactured things which were given to Ukraine. So,
Right.
it's not love of Ukraine that's causing all this aid. It's the fact that the military industrial complex is making out like bandits.
Right.
And they're going to, and it's to their advantage for there to be a semi-stalemate. So we can do this over and over and over and over again. And of course, as long as the stalemate continues, all it takes is some sort of accident, like the kind of thing that happened on the Polish border.
Correct.
And then you get an unanticipated escalation that could be a global disaster.
Mhm.
So, yeah, in terms of corporate America, if they're corporate Democrats or corporate Republicans, they're going to support this, and that's going to be a majority, and Biden's going to support it too. Now, you notice that the ultra right wing of the Republican Party actually wants to suppress
Right.
because they care more about bolstering authoritarian regimes, which is what Russia is, than they do, because they want authoritarian regimes in Russia. They're fine with them in China. Brazil, it's too bad as far as they're concerned that Bolsonaro didn't win in Brazil. They've already have authoritarian regimes in Eastern Europe. And I think what we have, and for me, as the son of Ethel and Julius Rosenberg, I keep thinking of one of my parents' final letters in which they said to me, and my brother, we are the first victims of American fascism. Well, they were fighting fascism with their politics, or at least they felt they were, in the 1940s. And here we are in the 2020s, dealing with this resurgence all over the world of the same kind of thing. And this is also bothers me about the potential for nuclear war, because in some ways, the political configurations we're seeing now remind me of the 1930s.
Mhm,
And the 1930s led to World War II.
mhm.
And we don't want the 2020s to lead to World War III.
Right, but back in the 30s, there was no atomic bomb as there is now. So everything, the whole scenario has changed substantially,
Mhm.
right?
Absolutely. And the result is that it's not only that, but in the 1930s, we didn't face, and we should never lose sight of this, because there are two specters haunting our current political situation. One is nuclear war, which has been there for a long time.
Mhm,
And the other is environmental apocalypse,
mhm.
which has been exploding. And the difference between the two of them is that in order to have the first one happen, we have to change our behavior. In other words,
Right.
rather than not dropping nuclear weapons, we have to start dropping them. Okay.
Mhm.
In order for the latter one to reach fruition, all we have to do is keep acting as we have been acting. So in
When
some ways, that second specter is more dangerous than the first. But of course, if people start dropping nuclear weapons on each other, it won't matter.
uh, Trump said something very interesting when he announced, for president again.
Mm.
He said that the Democrats are worried about environmental issues, but they're silent on a nuclear war. If there
Mhm.
was a nuclear war, that would be the end of everything.
Mhm.
And you got to agree with him on that, right?
Well, if there's a nuclear war in which hundreds of nuclear warheads are detonated, it's the end of everything. Okay.
Correct.
Uh, However, what I think of your characterization is it underestimates the environmental threat. We are on the verge of environmentally of ending everything,
Hmm.
not just making life unpleasant, not just increasing the having hundreds of millions of refugees, not just the flooding of cities on the coastline, but a situation which I think is decades away only, not hundreds of years away,
Hmm.
in which we can't grow our food, we can't breathe the air, and we can't drink the water. And when that happens, that's the same as nuclear war. Uh,
Hmm.
in other words, you turn your only home into an uninhabitable place.
Hmm.
So, and that's, when I put those two things together, the difference between them is we could have a nuclear war tomorrow
Or today.
or today. But when the environmental disaster is still, decades away, it's already happening, but that
Right.
the kind of overarching apocalyptic species threatening event is still a ways away. So, this is the context in which we're operating. And yes, the Democrats talk about the environment, but if you look at Biden, he's trying to have it both ways. Oh, I'm green, but I'm going to open up oil exploitation and
Mhm.
here and there and everywhere. And I would say that the corporate Democrats' environmentalism is largely phony. Uh,
Mm.
it's greenwashing. Uh,
Mhm.
it's trying to say that, oh, if we all have electric cars and solar panels and we use green methods of manufacturing, we can have our consumer, cornucopia of consumer products and live as we've been living. And That's just baloney. We can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And capitalism can't handle that, because capitalism needs competition and it needs growth. And environmental issues, preventing an environmental collapse requires cooperation, and it requires degrowth.
Mm-hmm.
And, degrowth, that's easy for me to say in my privileged position in the United States. For those who are already struggling to look for the next meal in the third
Right.
world, they can't afford any degrowth. So trying to figure out how to do this in a fair way that does not privilege those who are already privileged is a very, very difficult task. And it's one that I'm not sure that any elected official in the United States really has a complete handle on.
What do you think about a Biden-Trump rematch?
Well, I don't think Trump can be reelected. But I think, next year Biden could have a stroke. I mean, I think when you're anything involving Biden over the next 3 or 4 years from the Democratic perspective is a very slim read to rest your hopes on, because that whole thing could collapse very easily. Trump, on the other hand, I think he's been, because because of how poorly the people he supports have done.
Right.
He does not have the support of, I don't think he can get enough votes, even with all their gerrymandering and all their tricks, to win an election. I think from the Republican perspective, the best thing that could happen to them is for him to die. If Trump no longer exists, they wouldn't have to worry about Trump's base attacking anybody who they could then turn him into a martyr and put up a new person. And that new person could beat Biden. And that's scary too, because them in control is even worse than what we have.
If you put on MSNBC, everything is Trump 24/7. And that's because Trump drives the ratings up. So it's all ratings. And I don't think it's substantive. It's, what's good for the American people. And I don't see the next 2 years as an exciting period. I think it's going to be a tough 2 years.
Yeah, well, MSNBC is first of all, it's so repetitious, and also it may drive the ratings up. But if you actually look at the number of people who are watching this, you're talking about hundreds of thousands in a population of 300 million, 370 million Americans, and you've got a couple of 100,000 people watching these shows. It's significant, and those are people who make noises bigger than their numbers, but it's still a very small percentage of the population.
Okay.
And that, I find I sort of have to, when I watch MSNBC, I have to sort of keep myself from biting my tongue. It's the same thing over and over again, and some of them make some good points. I mean, one of the things that I do appreciate, though I haven't, that I'm actually interested in watching, is, Rachel Maddow has made these series of podcasts about the attempted coup in the 1930s and what happened with all those people. And I think it's important for the American people to see that, because that could be on the horizon here in the United States today. And we have to know that there's some realist, that this is a real possibility and something we should be considering. And that's great when they do some sort of research like that. But when they just mouth the same old, Democratic line over and over and over
Right,
and over again, I'm not sure where that gets anybody.
right. So what's your prediction for I know 2 years is a long time, but what do you say?
Well, I watch people like DeSantis and his buddy Elon Musk,
Mhm.
and the fact that Trump doesn't want to go on Twitter because Elon Musk, who owns Twitter, is a supporter of DeSantis. Of course, that's not what they're saying, but I see this emerging battle within the Republican Party over, can we get Trump's policies without Trump? Which is what I think a lot of Republicans would want. But so I'm looking forward with some relish to that internecine battle.
Okay.
But as I look to 2020, so I don't really know who the Republican nominee is going to be. And I think that Biden is going to announce in the next couple of months that he's
Oh,
running
God.
again. And that's very disturbing to me. But I don't see an alternative. It would be very interesting if somebody like AOC were 10 years older with 10 more years of experience, and would actually be willing to make a national effort. I would love to see how the voters, how many voters in America would actually support her. I think that would be very interesting, but I don't think it's going to happen.
I'm going to be doing a interview within the next week or two with a guy from the Bronx who went to an AOC meeting and point blank told her, why did you um, vote for all the funding for Ukraine? And she didn't have an answer for it. So, AOC plus all of the rest of the squad, I believe, just fell in line with the rest of the corporate Democrats,
Mhm.
you know?
Yep. And
So,
that's a real problem. I mean, that's a real problem. But I think the reason they did it was because Putin's invasion was 100% wrong. Okay. And it was very hard to resist to say, well, this invasion is 100% wrong, but we're not going to give the people who got invaded any help to defend themselves. And of course, the only way they could defend themselves was through corporate America and the military-industrial complex, because we're, in other words, one of the things that's very distressing, Cynthia, is we are so ensconced in our current corporate structure, and the military-industrial complex is such a deep and powerful part of our entire economic system that it is extremely hard to climb out from under it. And the result is you get anomalous responses from people in the squad to things that, to real, are you going to help the Ukrainians defend themselves? Well, if you want to do that, there's only one way to do it. And the one way to do it is to help the worst people on the planet. And that you get stuck with that. That's
one last question, and I think this
yeah.
is very important. What's your opinion of Zelensky?
I don't know. He's he's a charismatic television personality, just just like Trump. He came out of TV, so he knows how to pose as the hero of his country, and he's done a very good job of that. And that's very important to a people who are being attacked and need to resist. But in terms of what he actually stands for, I don't have a clue.
Wow. Okay. So we will continue this conversation as we get into 2023. Do you believe it's almost 2023?
Well, the passage of time never ceases to amaze me. And frankly, I kind of wish it would slow down.
But it's not going to,
No,
right?
no.
So you've been listening to Robert Meeropol. I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Issues That Matter. And if you like this show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you for listening and watching. Have a great day. Thank you, Robert.
Well, thank you. Great to talk with you.